Hi, well, my name is Tom Brenner, and I'm the academic dean for the last about a year and a half. And prior to that, I'm a faculty person, and I've been at Renison for, I started in the mid-'80s, starting part-time at, I think, about 85, 84, and full-time 88. So it's been close to 30 years, around 30 years. My first memory of Renison goes back even prior to that, because I had a paper route, and it was the Telegram, and I delivered papers to Renison in 1959, 1960, 61, in around there. So that's my first memory of Renison, and it was the Founders Building. I delivered papers to the Founders Building. The student days go back to the early 70s. I was not a student registered at Renison, but I did take a few courses at Renison, and that would have been in the early 70s, like 71, 72, and around there. Well, Judy Jawinski, Judy and I were in an English course together. I think it was English 109 that we took. And I don't know that we remember one another from those days, but we remember there was a conversation we had at one point in her office, and I think I saw the textbook on her shelf, and I said, oh, I had that textbook. And so we then started to talk about that textbook and the course that we had that textbook in, and we discovered we were actually in the same class. So in the mid-'80s, I started as a professor, and I was teaching 8 courses. We had a course load of 6, and taught 2 extra each year. And I guess it was the first year into that job that Ian Campbell, who was the principal at the time, came up to me and he said, how would you like to do a distance ed course? And I'd heard stories about distance ed courses, and I thought, I'm going to try and avoid this as long as possible. And so I said, let me think about that. I'm not sure I'd like to do that just yet. And he said, well, how would you like to be the warden of residence? And I said, once again, let me think about that. And that night, or certainly within a matter of a week, there was a college dinner, and he announced that I was going to be the new warden of residence. So I was a full-time faculty member and also warden of residence. And at that time, I think we had about 167 students. And yeah, it was a pretty busy time in my life, doing both. Oh, the fire in residence. Well, there was a fire in residence, and it was during orientation. I was the warden of residence, and I remember just getting into bed. It was about 11 o'clock at night, and I got a call from one of the Dons and said, Tom, I just want to let you know, nothing to get excited about. We got it all under control, but there's been a fire here at Renison. And I asked him to give me the details, and I wanted him to go and check a few things and get back to me within 15 minutes. And so he said, fine. And within a matter of a minute or two, I got another call from another Don saying, Tom, I think you should put an appearance in here because there's a fire, and there are people who are showing up here. Bill Payne, who was the head of maintenance at the time, had showed up, and there were a few other people. So I said, sure, I'll be right there. I live just a short distance from the university, and as I came over the hill at Westmount, I saw the reflectors from the fire department and from the ambulance and from regional police, as well as the campus police. And when I pulled into the parking lot, they were loading someone into the ambulance. And I thought, you got this under control? This is a minor event. This is something I shouldn't get worried about. Anyway, as it turned out, the person that they were putting in the ambulance was a fellow by the name of Jason McDermott, who had asthma, and he had showed the firefighters where the fire was. And he opened the door, and it was overcome by smoke. And that entire room was destroyed. There was a movie night, and they were all at in the Great Hall watching a movie, and it was a day when potpourri was a big thing, and there was a potpourri candle or oil thing burning on top of a radio, and the radio was plastic, and so it melted the plastic, down it went, caught the curtains on fire, and the room went. And so that was the night of the fire at Renison. Well, if Jeff Newell was a resident back in the 80s, now he's the director of residence. You notice the name change from warden of residence to director of residence. I would say that Jeff would not appreciate the kind of student that he and his colleagues were in the current day. It was a different time. I mean, there was a lot more drinking, there was a lot more socializing. Students were not as serious back then. Getting a BA seemed to be what you needed to get a job. Students didn't seem to worry about A's to the same extent that they worry about A's now. They would accept a B, they would accept a C, but not now. Yeah, so we had events like wind in and wind out and liquidation and things like that would, you know, the students who were there would have lots of fun things to say about those events. I think things have tamed down a lot. Liquidation was an event that happened at the end of term. They would get together and have a party and liquidate all of the supplies. And as you can imagine, it was there was a beer fridge, and liquidation, I suppose, in the early days meant that you would get together and you would drink what was left in the fridge. The head Don, who was on the loft, is now my optometrist. He was called Doc then. He's still, I mean, he's Doc now. Derek McDonald, I see on an annual basis for sure. John Heinzman, who was the head Don, male Don. John is now, I try not to see him professionally because he's the chief of psychiatry, children's psychiatry, at Grand River Hospital. But he does attend a number of meetings that I'm attending, and I actually thought that I'd get John to teach a course at Renison, and we came very close, but his time in the end wouldn't permit him to do that. There are others, yeah. I see Maria Soklas. She wasn't in residence, but Maria is the chief operating officer for Kia Canada, and Maria and I get together from time to time. Whenever she's got a new major campaign, marketing campaign, she oftentimes sends it my way, particularly if it relates to social development studies, and a number of her campaigns have related to inner city neighborhoods and developing community and so on. So yeah, those are three that come to mind right away. Yeah, besides beer making, because we did beer making one year. Skill, I mean, I think that I learned a lot from the people I worked with over the years. People like Ian Campbell, people like Darryl Bryant, Michael Bird, Mark Nagler. These are colleagues of mine and former principals who taught me about academia and taught me about how to research and how to get along in academia. Some of them were great scholars, and Mark Nagler was inspirational because Mark was a fellow who had cerebral palsy, and he was quite impacted by his disease, and he drove every day from Hamilton to come here to Renison and deliver his lectures, and he wrote books, and he was able to accomplish a lot given his the situation he had to deal with. And Mark, I found, was inspirational. Michael Bird was a fellow who taught me a lot about humor and how to deal with adversity through humor. So yeah, there's a lot to point to when it comes to things that I've learned here at Renison and the people I've learned them from. I will miss the people. I will miss the students. I found that being in front of a group of students on a regular basis kept me kind of real, kept me in tune with what's happening in the world, and you know, I was able to kind of benefit from their energy and enthusiasm, and I'll miss that for sure. What about the growth of the campus? Well, tremendous amount of growth in the last 30 years. I mean, at Renison, let's just focus on Renison for a moment. There was 2 buildings, and they were separate buildings: Founders Building and the Luxton Building. And to get from one building to the other building, students had to go outside in the wintertime. And we had our maintenance guy, Bill Payne, had to plow the driveway between the 2 buildings so that students could walk between the buildings. And because the cafeteria was in, or the Great Hall was in one building, and if you lived in the Luxton Building, you would have to go over in the morning, and I saw many students coming over in their pajamas and you know, through the snow to get to breakfast in the morning. Now we've got the link, we've got the teaching building, the library, and we're now building a new tower. So Renison went from, in terms of people working at Renison, I think there were about 12 faculty and a number of staff, so maybe 20 to 25 people, and we now have between 135 and 150 faculty and staff. So it's grown significantly. We had just one program, it was Social Development Studies, and now we've got Social Development Studies, we've got a Bachelor of Social Work, we've got a Master's of Social Work, we have East Asian Studies, we have Studies in Islam, we have the English Language Center and Institute, so there's a lot of credit and non-credit English teaching that's going on. So it's a big operation. It's much busier than it was when I first started. I mean, the summers were quiet around Renison, and now there isn't a downtime. Renison is busy 12 months of the year. We have students living in residence and students in the classrooms, and we're building an additional, by this time next year, we'll have an additional 30,000 square feet in the new tower, with probably an additional 16 classrooms and many offices. So, I mean, a lot of growth. And on the main campus, you see growth in nanotechnology building. We have, you know, health sciences grown. There's just a tremendous amount of growth on the campus and at Renison. Well, I think Renison is well positioned given the international kind of direction that this university is taking. With the language courses to become pathways to people going into engineering or to math or to science. With the East Asian Studies and Studies in Islam, that's kind of the beginning of an international cultural and linguistic kind of department. And then you've got social work and SDS. SDS is interdisciplinary and it kind of has a career path. Students see a career path there, whether it be social work or education or law, ministry. So I think I see Renison doing well going forward. Social Development Studies last year was the second largest faculty in arts when you consider the number of majors, students who are majoring in SDS. When you look at the student body, when I first started, we were doing a lot of off-campus teaching. I remember there was a lot of people who were in education, people who were teaching in elementary school that didn't have a degree, and so we were teaching in Toronto, Oakville, Mississauga, Georgetown, Brantford, and that was a large part of the teaching that we were doing was people who were needing to get a Bachelor of Arts, and mostly people from southwestern Ontario. And in the social development studies, it was mostly, there was a lot of people, again, from southwestern Ontario. But now, when you walk the halls of Renison, you see people from all over the world. And we just are completing a hire in diaspora literature in English. So we were looking at having someone who had a Middle Eastern or Eastern kind of focus in their teaching of English. So the student body has changed, the curriculum has changed. We have become more international, more global in our orientation. What stayed the same? Renison is, a lot of people describe Renison as this close-knit family-type community. We still have classrooms that are no larger than 50. We try and have most of our classes 50 or less. We have a registrar's office that's very accessible. We have a smallness, I think, that and a closeness that you might not find elsewhere. Yeah, I would say that that's the thing that I've noticed staying the same.